Imagine walking into a room full of ambitious people, all of them chasing power, money, influence, each convinced they're one move away from greatness. But there's always that one person who's calm, silent, watching. And before anyone else even realizes there's a game being played, they've already won it. That's how Machiavelli would move through today's world. Not by reacting faster, but by thinking further. His power didn't come from knowing everything. It came from knowing what to think about before everyone else did. To think ahead in today's world is to play a mental chess game where everyone else is still playing checkers. But Machiavelli's approach wasn't about intelligence alone. It was about mental positioning. He didn't try to predict the future like a fortune teller. He shaped it, one calculated decision at a time. And that's exactly what his 9 laws of strategic thinking would teach you to do. The first law is deceptively simple. Always think in systems, never moments. Most people judge every situation as if it exists in isolation. They see a person insult them, and they focus on the insult. They see a door close, and they panic over the loss. Machiavelli never saw events as standalone. He saw chains. Every action, every emotion, every decision was a link in a much larger system. If someone insulted him, he wouldn't ask, "Why did they say that?" He'd ask, "What are they trying to build by saying that?" Because no one acts randomly for long. Every repeated behavior reveals a hidden strategy. In today's world, this means looking past the surface of people's actions. When your boss compliments you unexpectedly, don't just smile, ask what's changing in the office. When someone you haven't spoken to in months suddenly wants to catch up, ask what opportunity they might see in you. To think like Machiavelli, you must stop interpreting moments emotionally and start reading them structurally. The second law, conceal your direction until you've secured your advantage. Machiavelli believed that clarity is a weapon best used at the end of a war, not the start of one. Today, everyone broadcasts their goals, online, in conversation, even subconsciously through how they move and speak. That's why most people are predictable. They want validation before they've even earned momentum. But Machiavelli would say, let your moves unfold like smoke. Be visible, but unreadable. The people who always talk about what they're building or planning are the ones easiest to neutralize. Because once others know your plan, they can position themselves against it, or worse, mimic it and beat you with your own idea. The most strategic minds don't announce, they reveal. Slowly, selectively, when the position is secure, when the outcome is irreversible. The third law, master emotional distance before intellectual mastery. Machiavelli understood that emotion is the enemy of foresight. Anger narrows perception. Pride blinds evaluation. Fear accelerates bad timing. The reason most people can't think ahead isn't because they lack intelligence. It's because they can't detach from the noise of their own emotions long enough to see patterns clearly. In today's world, detachment doesn't mean apathy. It means creating space between stimulus and reaction. When something threatens your pride, observe the feeling without responding. When someone tests your patience, delay your reaction, not to appear calm, but to gather data. Machiavelli didn't control emotions to appear strong. He controlled them because emotions expose your internal map to others. Whoever can make you emotional can predict your next move. And whoever can predict your next move already owns you. The fourth law, plan your retreats as carefully as your advances. Everyone plans how to win. Very few plan how to lose well. But Machiavelli saw retreat as a form of strategy, not surrender. A good retreat preserves your resources, your dignity, and your unpredictability. When the modern world teaches you to never quit, Machiavelli would laugh, because every strong position you hold eventually weakens through time, exposure, or envy. A master strategist knows when to exit a situation before it collapses on its own. Whether it's a business deal, a friendship, or a public stance, the key is to leave before your influence fades. Leave before your presence stops commanding attention. That way, you never experience decline publicly. You remain a mystery, not a memory. The fifth law, anticipate the decay of everything, especially power. Machiavelli knew that everything that rises eventually deteriorates. Alliances weaken, reputations fade, loyalty evaporates. But most people only prepare for growth, never for decay. That's why they're shocked when their influence begins to slip. In his world, the greatest strategist wasn't the one who could build an empire, but the one who could see the exact moment it would start to rot and prepare the next one before anyone else noticed. In your life, this means looking at your advantages with suspicion. The moment something starts working too well, a relationship, a system, a business model, is the moment you should already be planning its successor. Don't get attached to the structure that brought you success. Get attached to the mindset that built it. Because one day, the structure will fail, but your mind won't, if it's trained to evolve faster than everything around it. The sixth law: observe human nature as data, not drama. To think strategically, you must remove moral judgment from your analysis. Most people waste their foresight by labeling people as good or bad. Machiavelli never did that. He studied humans like a biologist studies species, objectively. He didn't say, "This person betrayed me." He said, "This person betrays when they feel cornered." That distinction is what allowed him to predict behavior before it unfolded. In today's world, you do this by becoming an observer in every interaction. Listen to how people describe others. It reveals how they'd act if the roles were reversed. Watch how people treat waiters, assistants, or anyone who can't benefit them. It reveals how they'll treat you once your usefulness expires. Every person is consistent. The only variable is whether they feel watched. Your job is to observe without revealing that you are. The seventh law: control perception before truth. This doesn't mean lie. It means shape what others see before they decide what to believe. Machiavelli understood that people don't act based on reality. They act based on their interpretation of reality. And whoever frames that interpretation first controls the narrative. If you walk into a situation and define it early, you decide how others will respond to it. If you're silent, they'll define it for you. In modern terms, perception control means crafting the image others hold of you with intention. You don't need to speak often, but when you do, every word must reinforce the version of yourself you want the world to react to. Say less, mean more. Be the person whose motives people debate, not the one who explains them. The eighth law: turn observation into timing. Observation without timing is just paranoia. Machiavelli's genius was not only in seeing what others didn't, but in waiting longer than others could. Most people make decisions when they feel ready. A strategist acts when conditions are ripe, even if fear remains. You'll always feel uncertain, but you must learn to move when opportunity peaks, not when comfort does. The modern world rewards fast reactions, but strategy rewards precise ones. Sometimes, the best move is to wait while everyone else rushes forward. The patience to delay action until it hurts is what separates the impulsive from the inevitable. And finally, the ninth law: never think for approval, think for positioning. Most people think to sound smart, to win arguments, to earn validation. Machiavelli thought only to advance. Every thought, every word, every silence was a calculated step in positioning himself closer to power, or at least further from vulnerability. If you want to think like him today, every idea must serve a strategic function. Don't say things just to express yourself. Say them to influence outcomes. Don't learn just to know. Learn to leverage. The world doesn't reward thinkers, it rewards strategists. And strategists think in layers. If I say this, how will they interpret it? What emotion will it trigger? How will that shape their next move? When you train your mind to think like this, you stop reacting to the world and start designing it. Because Machiavelli's secret wasn't that he predicted the future. He made everyone else walk into the one he had already built in his mind. Thinking ahead doesn't mean being smarter. It means being less distracted. The truth is, most people don't fail because they're foolish. They fail because they're consumed by the present. They react to every event as if it's the whole story, not realizing it's just one page. Machiavelli's mind was built differently. He didn't just analyze what was happening, he analyzed what was about to happen because of what was happening now. That's how he stayed ahead. But the art of thinking ahead isn't about constant overthinking. It's about pattern recognition. It's realizing that people don't change as much as they think they do. Environments shift, technology evolves, but human nature, fear, greed, insecurity, those remain constant. Machiavelli would study how these forces played out across time and then use them to predict what would happen next. Take the way people chase trends today. When something goes viral, everyone copies it, businesses, influencers, even governments. But Machiavelli would never chase the trend. He'd watch the reaction to it. Because the reaction reveals the next power shift. The crowd always moves a few beats too late, and the strategist profits from that delay. The real secret to thinking ahead isn't to move faster, It's to let everyone else exhaust themselves reacting, while you stay still long enough to see where their energy is heading. The person who waits the longest before acting usually ends up controlling those who moved first. But there's another layer to this. Machiavelli didn't just think ahead of people, he made people think in ways that served his plans. He would subtly introduce ideas into conversation, knowing those ideas would grow in the other person's mind, shaping their future decisions. That's how you create invisible influence, by planting mental seeds today that blossom into predictable actions tomorrow. And that brings us to one of the most dangerous but powerful habits of a strategic mind. Never argue for truth, argue for effect. When Machiavelli spoke, he didn't care about being right. He cared about being effective. In the modern world, people debate endlessly to prove they're smarter, more moral, more informed. But when you think like a strategist, you realize truth doesn't win influence, framing does. The person who defines how others interpret a situation controls the outcome. You don't win by overwhelming people with facts. You win by directing how they feel about those facts. That's why the most manipulative power today isn't censorship. It's narrative. Whoever controls what people feel about events controls what they believe about them. If you want to think ahead, study how narratives evolve. Pay attention to how people justify their own emotions, because that's how society rewrites truth. And here's where most people lose the game. They confuse knowledge with leverage. Knowing something doesn't mean you can use it. Machiavelli never wasted information he couldn't weaponize. In a world flooded with data, he'd use ignorance as a strategy. The less others knew about what he knew, the more powerful his knowledge became. So when you learn something valuable, your first thought shouldn't be to share it. It should be, how can I turn this into positioning? Another key insight he'd live by in today's world is this: assume every system is designed to distract you from the real power. From politics to corporate structures to social media, most systems aren't made to empower, they're made to consume attention. Machiavelli would have seen this immediately. He'd never argue with the system, never moralize about it. He'd simply step back, trace where the system channels people's desires, and position himself where those desires eventually collide. He understood something modern thinkers forget. Attention is the new battlefield. Everyone's fighting for visibility, but visibility without control is exposure. When everyone's screaming to be seen, the person who remains slightly hidden becomes mysterious, and mystery is magnetic. So if you want to think ahead, stop showing all your cards. Don't let people map your patterns. Disappear often enough to reset perception. But what truly separated Machiavelli from the rest wasn't his cunning, it was his patience with chaos. He didn't need life to make sense to plan his moves. He planned through uncertainty. That's what real strategic thinking demands. Acting decisively in fog. Most people freeze until clarity arrives. Machiavelli moved while others waited. Not recklessly, but with small, reversible actions that created clarity through movement. He once wrote that fortune favors the bold, but what he really meant was that fortune favors those who create opportunities in uncertain times. When everyone panics, the game resets. The map of power redraws itself. And in that moment, a single well-timed decision can make you leap ahead of everyone clinging to the old order. That's why Machiavelli didn't just plan for success, he planned for chaos. He'd never rely on stability, because stability makes people predictable. Instead, he'd design his strategies to adapt to disorder. In today's world, that means you don't just build one plan, you build a structure that can pivot. The goal isn't to avoid surprises, but to be the one who benefits from them. You can see this principle play out everywhere. Companies collapse because they plan only for growth, not decline. Relationships fail because people plan for happiness, not change. Governments fall because they plan for loyalty, not betrayal. Machiavelli's thinking would slice through all of that. His question was always, what happens when this stops working? The person who can answer that before it happens never loses for long. But here's a truth that even strategic minds forget. The ability to think ahead is useless without the courage to act differently. Because when you think further than others, you will look foolish at first. People will mock your patience, doubt your silence, and question your hesitation. They'll call you detached when you're simply observing. But that discomfort is the cost of foresight. Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't that he saw the future, it's that he had the discipline to let others mock him while it unfolded exactly as he predicted. Strategic thinking demands solitude. Not physical, but mental solitude. The ability to hold your thoughts even when no one agrees with them yet. That's what gives your ideas time to mature before they're needed. Because by the time the world catches up, your plan should already be in motion. And that's why Machiavelli's kind of foresight feels cold to most people. It's not emotional, it's architectural. He didn't want to feel powerful. He wanted to structure power. Every thought he had was a building block, not a reaction. In today's world, that mindset is your greatest weapon. Because while everyone else is addicted to the rush of reacting, you'll be busy constructing, quietly, methodically, until one day, everyone looks around and realizes they're living inside the plan you built long before they noticed. To think ahead of everyone else, you must accept a truth most people run from. Foresight is lonely. It separates you from the rhythm of the crowd. When you start to see patterns others can't, you stop fitting in with their sense of urgency, their fears, their small victories. You begin to move slower, speak less, and observe more. And that distance, the one people misunderstand as arrogance or detachment, is exactly what gives you your advantage. Machiavelli would have seen that distance as sacred, because thinking ahead requires silence, and silence terrifies the reactive mind. Most people are addicted to being seen doing something. The world trains us to mistake activity for intelligence, to confuse motion with progress. Machiavelli's mind was the opposite. He knew the power of invisible movement. In a world obsessed with exposure, he would move like a shadow, every step measured, every reaction delayed. Not because he was afraid to act, but because he understood that timing determines the difference between genius and failure. He would often say that fortune is like a river, it floods unpredictably, but those who build defenses before the rain control its damage. Thinking ahead isn't about predicting when it will rain, it's about knowing that it will and being the one prepared when it does. That means every advantage you build should have depth, money that earns when you sleep, allies who owe you favors, a reputation that speaks before you do. Because when chaos hits, the prepared don't fight it, they redirect it. And that's what the truly strategic mind does. It doesn't try to outsmart chaos. It uses chaos as camouflage. While everyone else scrambles to survive it, you act quietly inside it, unnoticed. That's how the invisible rise. It's how Machiavelli's kind of thinker wins in every age. But let's go deeper. Thinking ahead isn't just about predicting people or planning for systems. It's about understanding your own tendencies before they betray you. Machiavelli would have studied his own impulses like he studied others. Because the hardest opponent to outthink is yourself. The emotional high of winning, the fear of being forgotten, the pride that whispers you're untouchable. Those are traps. A strategist doesn't fight his ego with humility. He manages it with self-awareness. He watches it like an unpredictable ally, useful but dangerous. When you can forecast your own emotional reactions, you stop sabotaging your strategy in moments of heat. And here's something people rarely grasp. Thinking ahead doesn't mean living in the future. It means living above the present, seeing the layers underneath every choice. For example, when someone compliments you, there's the compliment itself, but underneath it, there's an intention. Beneath that intention, there's a goal. A strategic mind listens for the bottom layer, not the surface one, because that's where truth hides. Machiavelli's approach would fit perfectly in today's world of constant noise. He'd look at social media and see not distraction, but a data field of psychology, millions revealing their fears and desires through what they post, like, and share. He wouldn't scroll aimlessly. He'd study. Every trend would tell him what people currently worship and what they'll soon turn against. And that's how he'd always be 3 steps ahead, by predicting the next emotional shift in the collective mind. But this ability to think in layers requires another kind of strength, what Machiavelli would call detachment from outcomes. You can't think ahead if you're emotionally owned by what you want. The desire to win clouds the ability to see clearly. The strategic mind stays loyal to positioning, not outcomes. Sometimes that means losing battles on purpose to control the pace of the war. Sometimes it means letting others believe they've won just to make them predictable. Because when people think they're safe, they expose themselves. And yet, Machiavelli would warn, strategy without empathy is brittle. You must understand emotion, even if you never show it. Empathy isn't weakness. It's intelligence disguised as kindness. It allows you to see motives others hide from themselves. The strategist listens to tone, posture, hesitation, because those tiny cracks reveal what even words can't. When you can read emotions without becoming emotional, you can guide them, quietly, efficiently. One of the most dangerous misconceptions about thinking ahead is that it's about manipulation. It's not. It's about architecture. Manipulation forces results. Architecture designs them. A manipulator pushes people. A strategist positions them so they push themselves. Machiavelli's brilliance was that he didn't fight people's nature. He redirected it. He knew trying to change how people think is exhausting. It's easier to understand how they think and create conditions that make their natural instincts work in your favor. Imagine applying that to your life. Instead of arguing with people who drain your energy, you quietly adjust your environment so they exclude themselves. Instead of chasing approval, you make your presence rare until others compete for it. Instead of proving your worth, you make silence your proof. That's how you stay ahead, by building a life that doesn't need defending. Because here's the truth. The highest form of foresight isn't about predicting events. It's about designing your world so that no single event can destroy you. Machiavelli understood that the strongest power isn't visible dominance. It's structural security. Power that doesn't depend on luck, loyalty, or public perception. That's what he meant by true strategy. Creating systems where even if you disappear, your influence remains. So, if you want to think ahead of everyone else, start here. Detach from the noise, study patterns like an architect studies blueprints. Act when emotion has blinded the masses, and move so quietly that when your results appear, they feel inevitable. That's how Machiavelli would think in today's world, never guessing the future, just building the conditions that make it unfold on his terms. Because while everyone else is busy trying to survive the present, you'll already be living in a future that you quietly designed long ago.